Hey everyone, welcome to the video. If you're preparing for a product management interview, you're in the right place. In this video, we'll go over some of the most common and important interview questions you can expect. We'll cover topics like product sense, strategy, execution, and metrics. Everything you need to feel confident going into your interview. Whether you're applying to a big tech company or a startup, these insights will help you structure better answers and avoid common mistakes. Let's get started and walk through the key questions and how to approach them effectively. Before we begin, if you want to build strategic PM skills, the AI-powered Product Management Professional Program by Simplilearn, in partnership with UC San Diego, is an ideal starting point. This program teaches product lifecycle management, stakeholder communication, market analysis, and more. Certified product managers can earn 110 to 160 annually, with leadership roles commanding quite a bit more. This is Simplilearn's Product Management Interview Questions Explained series. There are 8 types of interview questions for product managers in this series. This is video 1 of 2 on estimation interview questions. I'm an instructor for the Product Management Professional Program and got quite a bit of experience in stuff like this. Specifically today, we're going to look at estimation interview questions. You may have been one of those in grade school stomping the feet saying, when am I ever going to have to use this math? Well, much to the disappointment of your elementary school self, in a product manager's interview, you just may have to answer some questions that are a little math focused. First one we're going to look at, estimate the number of coffee shops in New York City. So normally the interviewer, the hiring manager, is going to give you some of the numbers. The idea is not that they really want to see how well you do math. We're going to have spreadsheets and calculators. And what they're looking for is, do you have a structured approach? Do you really understand what it is that you're trying to solve for? So New York City is about 8 million people. That's a pretty standard number that most people are aware of. And a coffee shop in New York is going to serve around 2,000 people. Now, by the way, this is one of those things to consider. They might give you a number like 1,500. That's the average for coffee shops around the United States. About 1,600 people is the number that a coffee shop might serve. New York City, however, has a couple of specific things that would bump that number up. Very large number of people that work in New York City cannot afford to live in New York City, so they're commuting in to the city every day. And that's the kind of customer driving their way in, or riding the train and grabbing a cup of coffee as they walk to the office. The math, 8 million, and divide that by 2,000 people, you come up with about 4,000. So they're looking to make sure that you know that that's the way to go. But I really want to stress to you that they're looking for, are you thinking this through? So always you're going to want to bring something up like that coffee culture, or like the density of people per coffee shop because of that characteristics, because of the characteristics that New York City has. Pull that one away. How many flights take off from Heathrow Airport in a day? Once again, the math is is the question, and there are 480,000 flights every year. And of course, you can divide by 365 and you can give that average. That is the average number. However, travel is a seasonal thing. And a lot of people, especially at a place like Heathrow, flying out for business, but also flying out for vacations. Very it's gigantic international airport. So the number that you give should not be that specific. It comes out to 1,315 point something something. But pointing out that this is really a range because some days are going to be much lower than some other days. So saying something more like, so I think I'd answer between 1,200 and 1,500 is probably going to do it. And explaining to that hiring manager exactly why you're saying that. That's crucial. Even more crucial than the math, because I hope you're not actually writing that out on a piece of paper. It's impressive when people can do it in their heads. But that's kind of party trick impressive. In the work world, we really do want to see actual numbers, not just people showing off. Number three, estimate the number of cars sold in the United States. This is one of those, once again, there's one of those numbers like 8 million in New York. There's 330,000 or 330 million in the United States right now. And over the years, there's been a pretty consistent 5%, 5% of people buy cars. So multiply that population of 330 million by 5%, and you come up with 16.5 million cars. So you're going to get a solid B. You did the math, you're good. If you want to get an A, however, you might want to consider asking some questions or pointing out some things like the United States has an aging population. That boomer class just keeps on growing. Once somebody retires, they don't necessarily buy cars as often as when somebody's fresh into the workforce. Every couple of years you want to show off, or maybe you're starting a family and you've got to trade in that sporty convertible, get yourself a minivan so you can take the kids to soccer practice. The motivation behind changing out. There's a replacement cycle when cars break down, get old, and that's not going to stay at that same number, or chances are it isn't going to. Pointing out that you're thinking through those things, you want to answer that question with the right number. They're not worried about the precision, how many decimal points you bring that out to. They're interested in, are you thinking this through? So the fourth question is an interesting one. How many ping pong balls are going to fit in a plane? Specifically a Airbus 320. So we'll use the metric system, and about 110 cubic meters, three-dimensional meter. And okay, that's good. And a ping pong ball is about 0.00025 cubic meters. So easy enough, divide that volume of the plane by the volume of the ball, and you've got your number. Now, once again, I want to point out that they want to see that you're thinking it through. If these were cubes that stick together, there's no space between the cubes. You can stick cubes right next to each other. Spheres, however, are not. you put two or three balls together, it's going to be wider than just wider and taller and deeper than just the numbers would indicate. So you have to point out that there is a theoretical maximum. There's an efficiency that you just don't get with spheres that you might get with squares. That number, by the way, is 74%. My undergraduate degree is in education. Engineering, I mean. I am doing education. They're not going to expect you to remember that. Nobody would expect me to remember that. But they are going to expect that you have the experience, the common sense, the knowledge to know that that's not the final number. Like that is the theoretical number, but we know that you just can't pile ping pong balls efficiently the way you might be able to stack boxes. We're looking at strategy. Normally speaking, you'll be in your interview and you'll be giving a scenario. In this case, you've got a product and it's plateaued. Competitors are starting to capture more market share, and as you normally will have limited resources and limited time, you need to do something, and you need to do something fast. So, how would you identify the main barriers to growth and prioritize to reaccelerate the user base? It's about user research, and I'd say specifically comments and complaints. What has been said about your product, and in comparison, especially to the competitors, that's really going to be important. Analysis of the funnel. That first part is kind of a qualitative, touchy-feely kind of thing. Quantitatively, you should have some information about where these users are, or where a new customer especially is dropping off in your process. They make it through that front door of the landing page and they get in. Do they make it all the way to the point where they could buy your product or service? And that's where they drop off. Need to figure out, is it the cost, stuff like that. And of course, what is the competition? If you're lucky and if you got some good relationships, you can do some benchmarking. You can actually interact with the competitors. But if not, just your basic competitive analysis is going to do you wonders. Another question, what steps would you take to balance the efforts between acquiring new users and improving retention for existing users? And the answer here is based in the rule of thumb, and that is retention is always has a higher ROI than acquiring a new customer. Sales might be pushing you in we can go get some more customers from here and go get some customers over there. And certainly you do want to do that. But the cost of acquisition of a new customer is orders of magnitude usually larger than keeping your existing customers happy and adding something on that maybe they'd want to pay a little bit more for. Finally, a third question for this scenario: how would you measure the success of your strategy, of that growth over the next few months? And the point in KPIs and the point in metrics is that there are leading metrics, leading indicators, and there are lagging indicators. So a lagging indicator is at the end of the 6 months, what's the revenue? And obviously that's something that you're tracking. But a leading indicator is more like engagement. How many new people are walking through that front door? Or what's the buzz that's going on? Does it look like we're getting more attention? That's a leading indicator. It's not success yet, it's not revenue. But if you're not getting more people through the door, then it's a pretty good chance you're not going to be having that much revenue. All right, the next question. Competitors just launched a feature. Next set of questions. Competitors just launched a feature, and your team has been working on that same thing for months. That competitors gained some positive feedback by rolling out before you. Now, you were planning on releasing in the near future, in a couple of weeks, but what are you going to do now, right now, today, to um, deal with that? How are you going to respond? You could rush the release. You could get it out. Hey, we did it too. You can adjust your strategy a little bit of your rollout, or maybe some other approach. So when you get a question like this, make sure that you're thinking, and more importantly, that the interviewer knows you're thinking. You're not just giving up the first answer. They want to hire you as somebody that's going to make good decisions, and knee jerk is not usually the best way of making decisions. Um, and as a matter of fact, that can be the first part of your answer, that um, we have a plan and we're working on our plan. I would say 2 weeks. It can feel like a lifetime, but we've got a plan and we know we're going to have a solid release, and risking that is probably not the best thing to do. What steps would you take to differentiate your product and make sure your version of the feature adds more value to users? Uh, Answering here is about building on existing features. You know what you're doing, and you're doing it well. There is a customer base out there. Matching feature for feature is, of course, something you're going to want to look at. Is there something there that maybe we're not doing? But the most important thing is to really, really dig in on where your value proposition already lies. And then a third question to go along with this scenario: how would you manage communications internally and with stakeholders? Uh, this is one of those very tricky things. We talked about knee-jerk reactions earlier. Well, you're definitely going to have some of those. And the higher up you go, um, the bigger and the stronger the knees that are going to be jerking up. You need to be transparent, lay everything out, and address any kind of internal panic that might be going on. There's going to be some misalignment there that you need to work on. Um, it's balancing that pressure um, against the strategic thinking. And for the purposes of an interview, you're focused on making sure that they understand you're the strategic one. You're the one that they can bring in here. You can hit the ground running, because in a problem like this, um, hitting the strategy, keeping the strategy is the best thing. All right, a third scenario, we've got a mature product, and while it continues to generate revenue, the growth is slowed. There's a strong push to innovate and introduce new features, even exploring new markets to stay competitive in your organization. How would you balance the need for innovation while maintaining the current product's performance and stability? Um, First of all, pointing out that core platform stability, that's what enables innovation. That's what enables experimentation. Uh, Pro tip, by the way, I am an agile guy. I drank the agile Kool-Aid more than a decade ago. Um, One thing that I've come across more often than not is when you say the word experiment, especially at the executive level, you say hypothesis testing, it puts a bad taste in their mouth. I don't want you practicing. I don't want you experimenting. I want you solving problems. Adjusting your language and saying, I like this option. I think we should make a bet on this option. It just hits subconsciously differently. When an executive hears that you're betting on, yeah, I'll bet on that too. You get a camaraderie. You got language that aligns with the way that they're thinking. They know it's an experiment deep down, but saying it out loud is not going to get you that far. So, next question: Would you focus on improving the existing product, launching new features, or maybe exploring new markets to extend the product's life cycle? It's about risk and about appetite for risk. So expanding into something adjacent, that's usually safer than a brand new market. And knowledge of this rule of thumb is the point that you'll want to get across as the interviewer continues on with you. How would you align with the team's efforts to ensure that any innovation is sustainable in the long term? Usually a question like this is about capacity, and sometimes it's about specifically technical debt, right? There's a lot of things that we know we ought to fix this, but we got to get this thing going. So it's a mature product. There's complexity, and with that complexity and with that age, I guess we'll say that is a factor. So mentioning respecting the team's observations and comments, and making sure that the interviewer knows that you've got the pulse of the team. You already would know what is just, we'd really like to try this new technology, and what is, if we don't replace this component soon, the whole thing is going to blow up because we're going to run out of memory space. Those are the things. You're not a coder. You're not going to be programming, but you do know the realities of whatever technology that you happen to be a part of. And here's the fourth and final scenario for our strategy interview questions. You have two potential features to work on for your product, but only enough resources to focus on one. Feature A, the first one, improves user retention. Feature B will attract new customers, but at a cost. And before we go on any further, another pro tip is anytime you hear the word but, whether it's an interview like this in a statement or just in general, things are negated. There's a negative coming. That whole statement is possibly a bad place to be. Retention is always has a higher ROI and generally higher lifetime value effect to it. So that's the answer. And specifically because of the but at cost, you know that that's the direction you ought to go in. So how would you prioritize? Again, retention is it. Return on investment is always higher. And from the way it was phrased, it sounds like A is just going to cost a lot less than B. But customer feedback, market position, and resource constraints, if you ask about, is either of those a technology or a process that the team will have to be retrained in, or are both of them things that they could do out of the box? that's showing that strategic thinking there. Now, what factors would influence your decision? For instance, customer feedback, potential ROI, team capacity. Answering this one is all of those and more is the answer. But specifically, looking at each one of those and asking for your hypothetical question, do we have any hypothetical feedback? Potential ROI, you already know about because B has but at a cost. And team capacity, I mentioned earlier some questions you might want to ask there. Okay, the last of the questions for this interview scenario is, how would you communicate your decision and the rationale behind it to both your team and the stakeholders? And the answer here is that those two populations, they have a different language. So for the team, it's focusing on technologies and processes, very little about actual revenue numbers and such, except, of course, that the company is going to do better, so we're going to do better. Now, for people on the stakeholder side, generally speaking, they're looking at business value. So bringing up the revenue numbers here, the ROI, the specifics. A is going to improve retention, and retention is going to have that lifetime value impact. B is it's going to come at a cost. And while we want to make sure that we do implement B, implementing A first is going to bring us some cash flow. And that is it. In all businesses, cash flow is king. This is Simplilearn's Product Management Interview Questions Explained series. Video 1 of 2 on execution interview questions for product managers. Hello again. Luke Mays here, continuing on with our series on product management interview questions. Execution interview questions. That's the focus today. I'm going to start out with a scenario that the interviewer might give you, and then some questions that will follow. The scenario is that your company is about to launch a highly anticipated feature, but a critical bug was found. It's not a simple fix, and it's going to take a while, longer than anticipated. And team's already on tight deadlines. So how would you handle this situation? Would you delay the launch? Would you find a workaround? The important part here is to use the risk framework. See, risk is the severity multiplied by the likelihood. So severity is impact on the user, that kind of thing. So to answer it, first I would assess the severity. Is this bug catastrophic, or is it just cosmetic? Now, they already said in the scenario itself that it's a critical bug. So I would just confirm what they mean by that. What communication would you have with stakeholders to manage their expectations? So first of all, communicate clearly, communicate early. Stakeholders, they just don't like surprises. So something like, the stakeholders will get clear, proactive communications. What happened? What are the options that we considered? And what's the rationale behind choosing the option that we did? And the third question for this scenario, How would you ensure that the team stays motivated and focused, especially under pressure? Main thing here is you as product manager, you're not going to allow any blaming to go on. In work that we do, we all succeed together and we all fail together. Rally around the importance of quality and keep them motivated by focusing on the shared purpose that the team has. This is the second of 4 execution interview questions. Your product team is working with design, engineering, and marketing to launch a new feature. Design team wants a more polished, resource-heavy experience. The engineering team is pushing for a minimal version to hit the deadlines. So the question here, how would you balance these conflicting priorities to ensure both the quality of the feature and timely delivery? We're always trying to use MVP framing. It might not be the first release, the MVP itself, minimal viable product, but we're always asking, what is the smallest version that still creates business value? And aligning everyone on the shared goals of why we're building this feature and what metrics really matter is the key here. Now, how would you resolve any disagreements between these departments? Well, first of all, you need to make sure that you're acknowledging both perspectives. The polished design is the delight factor, the speed and engineering behind that. Those are the things to focus on. And then I'd propose that the team come up with something that meets the deadline while creating a backlog for anything that's left out of that release. We're not doing something. We're just trying to get the minimum out there to generate that user delight while also creating business value. If delays are inevitable, how would you prioritize what gets cut or postponed? How would you communicate this to all stakeholders? So if this conflict continues to escalate, I'd facilitate a structured trade-off decision. We're looking at the value and the effort and what's the impact of that, and make sure that everyone is there as far as communicating to everyone, always as transparent as possible. What is that user impact? What are the technical constraints and the timeline pressure? What was considered, and then the rationale behind what was considered. That's the key parts, or those are the key parts of communicating that out, so that everyone can see that you considered all the options. You didn't just shoot from the hip, and you made a choice that was strategic, and what's best for the company is best for everyone. You've launched a new feature, but the feedback is mixed. Some users are loving it, but others are reporting usability issues that make it difficult to navigate. You have limited resources, of course, and need to decide whether to fix these issues now or iterate on the future versions that you have. We'll look at the question, how would you prioritize the feedback, and decide whether to address issues immediately or push them to a future update. Actually, this is one of those, not a trick question, but whether you have feedback like that or not, the process remains the same. You are looking at what the highest priority is and working on that in the next sprint. So quantifying the severity of the feedback, that's number of users affected? Is it drops in engagement? Are there support tickets out there? And you fix the critical, and then you continue on with your planned development. What steps would you take to ensure you address the most critical pain points first? Leveraging analytics is always the answer. You make data-based decisions. So use that user feedback in ranking by just how severe they are, also how often they might come back. You see, you segment your feedback into the critical stuff and the nice to have stuff. But as I said before, we continue with our agile delivery. We are iterating every sprint, and we catch what's most important and we get that fixed. We don't have a knee-jerk reaction. And then finally, how would you balance user needs with ongoing product development? Once again, it's kind of a tricky question because user needs are kind of what the development is all about. We're trying to make them awesome at what they do. So if something affects core workflows or a critical set of users, absolutely prioritize those features. But you want to distinguish between vocal minorities, and sometimes there's a silent majority out there that wants something fixed. They're the ones that need to be addressed. Fly that one away. You have two key features in the product roadmap, but due to time and resource constraints, you can only focus on one. Feature A is critical to retention. Feature B is going to help acquire new customers, but it's less urgent. The fact that the word "but" is in there means you're kind of in a bad spot. Everything is negated when you hear a "but." You should, in your work world and your private life as well, you should never use the word "but." An "and" would work just as well, and you're not going to get that negation that comes with a "but." There's a little pro tip for you. Anyway, first question with that in mind, how would you prioritize which feature to develop? What factors would influence that decision? Starting with data, things like a churn rate, customer acquisition cost is going to be very important here, as well as the lifetime value of a customer. Your business strategies, specifically growth targets, are also important here, because if there is a executive push for more users, that's different. Barring that, if retention is at risk, you prioritize feature A, you prioritize retention. That protects your revenue base. It's a rule of thumb. Keeping a customer is orders of magnitude cheaper than acquiring a new customer. How would you communicate this decision to your team and stakeholders, ensuring alignment and understanding? First of all, rationale that you went through has to be included in the communication. You need to show empathy for the losing feature, but our decision is we're going with A. If retention is at risk, I'd always prioritize A, because it protects revenue, and cash is king in all businesses. How would you ensure the team is motivated, regardless of which feature is chosen, and that they stay focused on delivering a successful outcome? Motivate the team by celebrating that you're tackling the most critical driver of success. And by the way, whether you chose A or you chose B, you chose the one that is the most critical driver of success. Technical interview questions this time. These are going to test whether you, the candidate, can speak the language of engineering, so that you know how to make trade-offs when decisions come along. Uh, We're not actually there to write code. If you find yourself writing code, you might want to consider that something has gone wrong. The product manager um, thinks about technology trade-offs, um, but doesn't actually implement those sorts of things. The kind of questions that you might come across, uh, what's the difference between SQL and NoSQL? So SQL, to start out with, is what you know of as a database that's run off of a DBMS, a database management system, and it's got tables, right? A predefined schema of rows and columns of data, relational database, it's also referred to. So NoSQL is that stands for not only SQL, by the way. Well, it's schemaless. It doesn't store in that sort of relational way. It actually stores in just a key and then the value. It's actually stored in flat files. You get eventual consistency with NoSQL. What that means, first of all, it had the acronym ACID: atomicity, consistency, isolation, durability. It means when you go to and when you make a SQL query, you get the answer that is the answer. In a NoSQL database, you might not get the exact latest. It is whatever is there at the time. And for things like populating a website, that's the kind of thing you want. You want it as fast as possible. Think about the last time you were on Amazon and you pulled something up. It's much more important to the user experience that it pulls up. If the price had changed slightly, it's a problem, but it's not. It's a bigger problem if nothing shows up and you decide just to go away. So SQL scales vertically. That is, if you want more power, more performance, you need to build a bigger SQL server kind of thing. NoSQL, it scales horizontally. And again, for that performance region, if you're looking at Amazon and you're in Asia, you're looking at a different server. And if you're grabbing data from another place, you're looking at another server. So you're getting that speed. But again, the data that you're getting is not necessarily to the second the correct value. So if you do need strong consistency, uh, like payments, for instance, banking, that needs to be accurate all the time. NoSQL is when you need more flexibility. You need more scale and volume, like the Amazon example that I gave before. Social feeds also, same kind of thing. Next question, how would you ensure the scalability of a web application? So with web applications, the first thing to think about is load balancing. You're distributing one server in one location, another server in another location. It's that traffic management is really what we're talking about here. And then you think about caching also. Tools like Redis and Memcached, they're storing session data for millions of users. And when those users log in, that session data is already there. So it loads fast and they're there. It feels like it's instant. Microservices are able to be spun up when you need more. If you have a login service and there's just one of them and two people need to log on at the same time, one of them is going to have to wait. So You spin up another one. You spin up 10 more just in case everyone logs on and nobody is delayed. Docker is a tool for containerization. So putting it all together there and having that able to be, well, spun up the same, just like microservices. So you can do multiple, you can understand that's a lever that you can pull to get better performance. What is an API, and how would you decide between using a REST API or a GraphQL API? Application Programming Interface is that acronym, and where it's the communication between this program and this program. They're using a agreed upon standard to talk to each other. And REST is stable and simple. Anyone who's signed up to use that API knows exactly what they're going on or what they're going to do. And there's multiple in a system that's keeping track of people. There's one place to go to get the person's name and another place to go to get the address. It's kind of a singular thought kind of thing. GraphQL, on the other hand, is flexible. That is just kind of one spot to go to, and you can ask for whatever you want, but you got to know what you want. There's some complexity there. There's some knowledge that needs to happen in order to use that GraphQL. So it's usually a lot faster, but at the same time, you got to know what you're doing. So REST requires versioning, right? If you change the way that it sends back that name, maybe it was last name, comma, first name, and now it's first name, then last name. Well, you need to let everyone know. GraphQL, on the other hand, you're able to continue to use the same one because your users, your customer, the people that are calling to that API, they know that they're calling and getting all the data back they want, and then they're going to put it into first name, last name, or last name, first name. The trade-off is simplicity and comfort versus flexibility. Next technical interview question is to explain the key considerations when building a product that's going to scale globally. So first of all, your application should be localized. That is, languages and time zones. There's cultural adaptation that needs to happen. Currency, for instance, a Canadian dollar is not a US dollar. So your system in the background needs to make sure that it knows somebody buys something for $5, that actually will be something different depending on where it's internationalized. Infrastructure is usually important. When you spread out your users, you want to also spread out your content. There's something called a content delivery network, or a CDN, and that just basically means we're going to put in Asia this server and in North America this other server, and those users, so that they don't fall victim to too much latency, are calling to those different places. So architecturally, you have to set things up different. And then finally, compliance. There's local regulations that are different from place to place, region to region, country to country. In the European Union, for instance, there is the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. And they have privacy laws that are very specific, that if there are European users, you have to follow those rules. The fine on that one is drastic. It's 5% of 5% of revenue. That's not 5% of profit, that's revenue. So if you're a $1 billion company, then a fine could be 5% of $1 billion, which is quite a lot. Analytical questions. They're looking to know if you can turn analyses into actionable product decisions, something that's good for the company as well as good for the user. How would you analyze churn for a subscription-based service? I've got some bullets to follow that are some more detailed questions you might run into. Specifically, how would you identify the root causes of churn in your user base? The answer is you want to follow a structured funnel approach, right? Users are going to come in, that's the acquisition, and they're going to sign up or not, that's activation. They're going to engage with this system. And then finally, you're working on retention. You're working on keeping them, following that structured funnel approach, watching what's happening. That's the plan. What metrics would you track to analyze user retention? The number of daily active users or monthly active users, depending on your specific product. If somebody doesn't need to go in but once a month, then you want to look at the monthly users there. And how would you segment users to better understand churn patterns? And how would you use that data to prioritize retention strategies? Chop the user base up into segments, and cohort analysis is one very good way of doing that. It's basically grabbing a chunk of users, like by the sign up date. These are all the people that signed up on the first of the month, and then following them as a group so you can kind of see what the average users. Looking at new users versus long-term users is another important one specifically for looking at churn patterns. Now, how would you use that data? Well, you want to take those things like Net Promoter Score and other qualitative things and match that to the quantitative kind of things, the usage patterns. 5 minutes a day for the first month, but then it's 3 minutes every other day for 2 months, then it's 1 minute. Then you know that they're using it less and less. They're seeing less value over time. And talking about time, you want to look at the lifetime value, the LTV. That's how we're going to prioritize the retention strategies. Next one is, how would you evaluate the performance of an online advertisement campaign? So the specific questions you might see, what are key metrics that you would use? The click-through rate, the most commonly used, just how many people are clicking on that ad. Reading the ad is interesting, but if nobody's actually clicking on it, then it's far less value. And so there's a cost per click, the CPC, and that's another one that needs to be watched, because you have a customer acquisition cost, the CAC. From that acquisition cost, you could figure out your return on the ad spend, ROAS. Conversion rate is the last one. How many of those people that clicked through actually became customers? They were converted from just a looky-loo to somebody who is actually providing revenue to the company. Now, how would you determine the return on investment of the campaign? Actually, I kind of just went over that and optimize it for better performance. That's the measuring the revenue versus the spend as you iterate, using A/B testing to see just how those ads are performing. How would you assess the effectiveness of targeting? the creative assets, the different pictures. This one's red, this one's blue. Ad placements, where you're putting. Are you going on Twitter or X versus you're putting them up in Facebook? All of those are looked at. And then the A/B testing is having an experimentation mindset. You don't just switch over to a new one. You take 10% or so of your existing and you give them those new ads and you see if there's any improvement, right? If there is, then you ought to go there. If you try out an ad, and you know what? We're not getting any better numbers. Probably it's not a very good a good ad. Next series of questions around how would you assess the impact of a product update? What methods would you use? What we're talking about here is what key performance indicators or KPIs. So things like retention of the users, task completion, right? We had an old feature that they were going to do something with this new feature. Are they doing more of that? Is it happening more often? Are individual users doing it twice a day and they used to do it just once a day? That kind of thing. Now, how would you analyze user feedback and product usage data to assess whether the update has met its goals? A/B testing is always a go-to method. We have our previous, now we have a new release, so now we have A and B. And you can look at different things like a cohort analysis. All of the people that signed up on the first of the month, we're going to compare, or we're going to watch how their usage changed for that particular group. Funnel metrics are also a good thing to look at. People are coming in and signing up, they're engaged in using. Are they being retained, or are they dropping off after 1 month of usage or 1 week of usage? What key performance indicators would you track post-update to ensure the product continues to meet user and business needs? When you're looking at KPIs, when you're looking at metrics, there are leading indicators and then there are lagging indicators. So a leading indicator is like how much engagement is there, how many new people are walking through the door and taking a look around the shop. A lagging indicator is something like revenue or something like retention. It's the end result. If you're getting less people through the front door, likely you're going to have less revenue at the end of the month. So those are a couple of indicators, and that's a few indicators. And looking at leading indicators to project out to lagging indicators, that's the process that you go through. And finally, we have a fourth set of questions, things about deciding whether a feature should be kept, it should be improved, or it should be deprecated. So what data points would you consider when evaluating the success of a feature? You want to look at it through a few lenses, 3 lenses: usage, what's the behavior of the users as they're engaging your feature. You want to look at what's the value, like what value does the user perceive they're gaining, and what's the business value? What is the overall revenue that comes in due to this feature? The third lens is about the cost. See, it takes resources to maintain something, and that maintenance, as a feature gets older and becomes more and more complex, it costs more to keep it functioning right. You want to tie the things that you're seeing through those lenses to the strategy. What is it that the company wants to do? Is this a core feature that continues to be something that is aligned with the strategic plans? Or is this something that's really just distracting? It's a good thing to have, but it's not really what your company wants to do. Next, how would you decide whether a feature should be improved or removed? considering user feedback and product strategy. Answering this question, you want to show that you have a willingness to sunset the feature. Any feature that no longer serves the users, that's the user feedback, or the company strategy. Things like development capacity are important. It costs time and it costs money, and there are alternative investments. So things like the maintenance burden compared to what the ROI is, what the revenue is associated with that. And always don't forget about that usage, that if they're using it less and less, you're either on your way to sunsetting or drastically need to do some improvement, change it up so that people are using your feature so that they can gain that value. And then finally, what role would user behavior, that's what I was just saying, business impact and resource allocation play in your decision making? So user behavior, if they're dropping off, if they're using it less and less, that is going to play in. You don't need it anymore, or you need to make it better. Business impact, if it's not making the kind of money to justify the last one, resource allocation, well, then it's something that probably should be removed from the toolbox, because your strategic direction is you're focusing in on something else. Behavioral interviews are what we're going to talk about today. This is a special subset of interviewing techniques, and one that I'm a big fan of, is it gives you a chance to not only show that you know what you know, but also to show how it is specifically that you have applied what you know to the real world. If you ask anyone a question, the question, if you saw a baby on the second story of a burning building, what would you do? Every single one of them is going to answer you. I'd climb right up the trellis, grab that baby, and save that baby. That's a nice thought. But if you watch the news, there's kind of a lot of babies that get burned up in house fires. What people say is not actually what they do. And when behavioral interviews are done, it is amazing how many people just don't have an example. Say, I am a leader, and tell me about a time where you were a leader. Blank comes over their eyes. They don't have one. So that's why I'm a big fan. We're going to use the CAR framework: context, action, result. There's a few different frameworks that can be used. STAR is another one that's really popular. For purposes of these slides, though, there's three things. We're going to set the stage with the context, going to explain what you actually did with the action, and then what was the result? What was the outcome and the impact to the user and to the business? So the first behavioral question: tell me about a time you had to persuade a team to adopt a new approach. So first, the context, CAR. Briefly describe the challenge and why a new approach was needed. You give a specific place. When I was at X corporation, we ran into an issue with acceptance of a certain feature. Next, the action. What did you do? You're explaining how you persuaded the team to adopt the new approach in this example. You're emphasizing, for this example specifically, you listened so much more than you actually spoke, that you were showing the empathy that you needed to show in order to accomplish CAR for result. Share the positive outcome, the team alignment, the improved performance because of this approach that you persuaded the team to take. Another typical behavioral interviewing question is to describe a time where you had to handle a difficult customer complaint. You'll see a theme throughout these things. The interviewer wants to find out how you react. I actually have been a part of a number of hiring teams, and I was shocked, and I am shocked every time. There's always somebody who, well, you know what? That customer was a jerk, so I told him to get out of here. We didn't want his business. And I have to kind of, you know, I'm interviewing you, right? For whatever reason, it's always people tell the truth when you ask about their specific experiences, which is different than asking about what would you do in a theoretical case. So first, the context. Describe the nature of the complaint. Make sure it's a clear description, and make sure you include the stakes. You know, this was going to affect our revenue, or this is going to negatively impact the brand. The action, outline the steps that you took to resolve it. Listening is always important for handling a customer complaint, showing that empathy, that you understand what they're feeling, you feel what they're feeling. And then the result, highlight the positive outcome. You know, there was customer satisfaction. You retained that customer. This is a specific example. So, you know, that customer was going to quit, but instead they signed up on the gold plan, and we actually got $20 a month instead of just the $5 from before. So here's another. Tell me about a time when you had to resolve a conflict between team members. So the context, explaining that conflict, you want to show that you've got the emotional intelligence, that you knew what was going on, and you're showcasing your leadership and facilitation skills. So you set that frame, and then how is it that you mediated the situation? How is it that you used that emotional intelligence and those leadership and facilitation skills to really knock it out of the park, to encourage communication and come up with a solution? And then when you talk about the result, share that outcome. You know, how's the teamwork improved? The project, that project where the conflict happened, you know, that was a success. We rolled it out. What you're doing is highlighting that it's a not just a short-term fix. You had lasting resolution. And here's the fourth one. Now, you're not going to get 4 of them in one interview, but you might get 2, sometimes even 3. You need to make sure that after you watch this video, that you think about your time working and figure out an example that you know you did good, and just use that example. All of these things, you know, there was a conflict, and you solved the conflict. Any one of those could have used the same example. You need to have a few examples. This one isn't a conflict. This one is working under pressure. Give me an example of when you had to work under pressure to meet a tight deadline. So have a couple of them, have 2 or 3 of them, and then just don't veer off of that, though. It saves you a lot of time and thinking, oh my God, when is you have your go-to story. Just tell that story with a different align it with the question, and you're going to answer that question. So in this case, describing the pressure and the deadline, you're going to be showing how you you showed resilience under stress. There's definitely going some times in your life where there was some stress. So just describe that out. When I was at Corporation B, we needed to deliver and we weren't done yet and nobody knew what to do. Then tell the action. How was it that you were able to prioritize the tasks and manage the time? You don't want to give a hero story here. It's not about heroics, or at least they're not looking for heroics. What they're looking for is that you're a planner. You're task oriented. You work with a team and you show teamwork to get things done. Want to choose the best story. And finally, in the result, when you share the successful outcome, meeting the deadline, achieving the objectives, meaningful consequences of what you did. And by the way, reflecting on how you'd avoid this in the future, on all of the behavioral interview questions, but this one in particular, that really, really makes a difference. It shows that you have a growth pattern, and you're going to bring that to the table when you join this organization. Product design interview questions. So the first of the questions, design a new feature for Instagram that addresses user needs. About half the time, interviewers are going to be offering a standard application that most people use, most people are familiar with. I do want to point out, though, that sometimes you're not actually familiar with that particular one. You could wing it, but there's really no benefit to that. If you just explain that's one you haven't used before and ask them to explain it to you, either they will or they'll just choose a different application that you are familiar with. So, that said, they're asking for something that addresses user needs. You want to identify a meaningful gap in the current UX. You're showing off your creativity, but also your product sense, the fact that you empathize with the user pain points and you understand the user needs. Suggesting a feature like AI-powered personalized content filter can be a good one to do because you're proposing a solution that balances user value with business benefits. You can show that you understand where the market is going and how you can keep Instagram aligned with that. Explaining user and business benefits like more engagement and more ad revenue because of this is really crucial, right? They're hiring you to be a product manager, to empathize with the user, but also to filter that by business value, right? You need to link the design to business outcomes. So for all of these, that's always crucial. Here's another one with a app that is on everyone's phone. How would you improve Uber's ride-sharing experience? Again, with the customer empathy forefront, you can introduce predictive booking, language translation, but do it with that empathy. You can say, this has happened to me, or even better, my mom was at the airport and she was really uncomfortable. She didn't know how long it would take for Uber to arrive, and she sure just wished she could plan ahead, just schedule it early so that she would be more comfortable. Showing that empathy that way is going to go a long way. But you could add safety features like a panic button or ride tracking. Practical problems is the point, that using that empathy, you understand that there are just some things that are getting into a stranger's car is not good, and solving those problems then is what you're doing here. Eco-friendly, sustainability, highlighting that you understand broader business and social impacts is also an opportunity here as you go through these design kind of things that you're thinking about. You're thinking about the product on a grand scale. So I mentioned about half the time it's an app that they'll ask you about. The other half of the time it's more theoretical. Design a user-friendly mobile app for senior citizens. So simplicity in UI design, larger fonts, voice assistants, these are all things that specific demographic that was thrown out there. That's what they need, what they would appreciate. Emergency contacts and health tracking. That's something that maybe not out there as you think about 20-somethings taking an Uber home from the bar. But health tracking might be something for senior citizens. So those demographic specific needs are, you're addressing them. You're solving the right problem. Customization for individual needs that focus on ease of use and clarity. And also at least implying or throwing in there some business knowledge that I think there are a lot of seniors that don't use because of this. But if we offered these solving their individual needs, we could probably increase the use of this particular application. And finally, the fourth of our product design interview questions: how would you prioritize features in a product roadmap for a SaaS product? Software as a service is something that people sign up for, and you want to solve their pain points and align with business goals, right? You want to show that strategic thinking. And specifically for the prioritization, choosing a framework. One of the great ones is RICE: reach, impact, confidence, and effort, RICE. There's other ones out there. If there's one that you know this company uses, for instance, that would be a wise decision to use that one and show that you use it. But in any event, showing that you're aware of the frameworks and you use these frameworks, that's the key. You make data-informed decisions. And pointing out that you are a believer in iterative delivery, that you release in phases. You start with the minimum viable and balancing the user needs with the business goals, getting the most critical things out to the market, get it out as soon as possible. Favorite product interview questions? It is. These, by the way, aren't my favorite type of interview questions. These are questions about actually your favorite product. So think about a product you really enjoy using, whether it's a gadget, an app, or a service. And literally, you can choose whatever you want. However, you're wanting to be a product manager, and so you are a strategic person. Choosing a product that's in the same universe as the product this particular company is using, that might be wise. If you're interviewing at a bank, the Robinhood app is probably a good bet. If you are at a social media company, a competing social media product might be a wise choice there as well. First thing is, why do you love it? You're showing off your product intuition and your user empathy here. So this is why I love it. But saying something like, and I know I'm a part of a major segment for this app, just giving that awareness, that's going to go a long way. But explaining clearly just what drives your enjoyment, is it the usability, the aesthetics, the features? By showing what you love, you're kind of projecting what you're going to bring to their product. So if they're not a company that seems to be interested in aesthetics, maybe not talking about how it's the most beautiful thing out there. If they're more of a database company, maybe talking about how you're really impressed with the data. It would be a good tactic to use. And then what specific improvements or new features you would add to the functionality, the user experience, or the appeal. What you're doing here is showing that you can articulate what makes a product great. Creativity and thinking of new products and stuff, that's not exactly it here. We're really talking about how you can articulate individual features and differentiate those features. That's what you're showcasing. So the next favorite product interview question is, can you identify a product that you believe has room for improvement, whether in terms of design or performance or usability? You're showcasing your analytical thinking and problem identification, right? So what changes would you make to this product? You want to focus on the tangible things for those. They said design, performance, or usability. If you want to choose performance, show that you have some knowledge of how that's done. You know that they are currently serving this out of one place, and you would definitely do more of a federated design so that latency is lowered. That kind of thing. And how do you think it would impact its overall effectiveness and user satisfaction? What they're looking for here is that you're proposing a practical solution. And what you can do here also is show that you're aware of trade-offs because you are focused on business impact. So you're talking about the user satisfaction, and you're also at least implying, this comes at a cost, and that with this improved satisfaction, there will be more users, which is going to generate more revenue. A third favorite product interview question: imagine an underserved market or demographic that you feel is being overlooked by current products or service. This is a great one for market awareness, showing that you see the diamond in the rough. What type of product or service would you develop to meet the specific needs of this group? Showing off your empathy, that you not only understand that there is this group that is an opportunity, but that you have the kind of analytical mind that is also looking at what is different about this demographic, about this underserved market, that is there. Are you able to identify the pain points for that particular group? Would you ensure that it is accessible, affordable, and impactful? And strategic thinking in product development is what you're showcasing, right? You see these things that are going to make it accessible or affordable, it's going to make an impact. And once again, at least implying as you answer that, how that value you create as for the user can be value that is business value for the company that wants to serve that demographic. And here's the fourth of our favorite product interview questions. Consider a product or service you regularly use, whether it's a mobile app, software, or even a physical item. While it's useful, you feel it could be more efficient or user-friendly. Before we jump into this one, you're there for an interview to impress this person. So I'll say it again to make sure that you choose something that is in the domain of the company that you're going to. You don't have to, if your product that you normally use that you wish would work better is associated with your car. It's a fine thing to do. But if this is a company that is a purely virtual software kind of thing, they're going to understand. And it's a framework to use to showcase your skills, but it would be a much better framework to use to choose something that's similar to their product. Just a little helpful hint there. So, what specific areas do you think need improvement? You're showcasing that you've got that user experience thinking, and you're a good problem solver, right? You want to state just what it is, but state it specifically, something that is small enough to fit in a box that can be a release of a new feature. How would you redesign or enhance the product to better meet the needs? So your analytical evaluation in conjunction with your creativity, that's what you want to show with this enhancement that you want to make. So explaining the expected impact and with as many numbers as possible, that's going to show and give them the impression that you are a data-based problem solver. It's not just this feels right, but there's some data that you could use to back that up.